Hi, I'm Marx, and I'm going to be presenting on America's corporate sponsorship of the Holocaust. Business executives are manipulating public policy for the sole purpose of increasing their financial gains. There is little, if any, regard for the social well-being of the masses. The capitalist mantra has become what is good for business is ultimately good for the public. Yet greed, arguably the driving force behind capitalism, seems to be inherently evil. Hitler used his personal vendetta with the Jews as a means of giving the German people a scapegoat for Germany's problems and a guideline for his own aspirations. Hitler's deep-seated childhood resentment and destructive paranoia led him to believe that the Jewish people had absolute power over all major nations. The leaders of big businesses served on many executive boards concerned with America's economy, global relations, and educational institutions. The powerful align themselves with one another to protect and further their interests. For example, Thomas Watson, the head of IBM, served on the board of the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, was an honorary trustee of New York University, and chairman of the American Division of International Chamber of Commerce. At one point, before World War II, Watson had been nominated to serve as the director of the Federal Reserve. In turn, Hitler provided them with an ideal labor force. Skilled individuals who worked for next to nothing, if anything at all. Prisoners were typically worked until they were no longer economically beneficial to the camp. Only then, once the life was sucked out of them, were they eliminated. The plan was simple and cost-effective: extermination by labor. Many businessmen had to weigh the risks of doing business with Hitler because Hitler made his intentions very, very clear. The automobile industry was reluctant to trust Hitler at first, but once production jumped from 52,000 cars in 1932 to 342,000 cars in 1938, doubts were eased. By then, people had no reason for concern. 1 out of every 12 jobs was filled by car makers. The gross national product nearly doubled, and unemployment was at its lowest levels since pre-World War I. In early 1929, General Motors was the largest producer of automobiles in the world. It purchased Germany's leading car company, and American executives and engineers were relocated abroad. They continued business as usual only until the war officially broke out in 1939. When the Nazis invaded Poland, they traveled in vehicles built by Ford and General Motors. The companies enabled Hitler to launch his unprecedented Blitzkrieg attack during which he almost successfully conquered Europe. The tanks and trucks relied on fuel technology provided by GM and rubber materials supplied by Ford. Hitler knew that he lacked the energy to carry out his mission, and General Motors saw another business prospect. Former senior Nazi officials have publicly stated that General Motors literally handed Hitler the keys to launch his plan of mass extermination and European conquest. At the beginning of this paper, I asked how it was possible for a third generation Holocaust survivor to drive her father's old Ford. Why would someone support a company who showed little, if any, regard for their life or the lives of their friends and family? The answer is the system. When my grandparents came to America, they wanted to avoid any future discrimination. Advertising and a desire to be accepted made them vulnerable and easily seduced by the American dream. In the 1950s, nothing was more American than a Chevrolet. They chose to purchase a General Motors Chevy because the company now represented something different to them. GM tapped into the proud feelings Americans shared for their countries in the 50s. Who you are became what you own. If my grandparents wanted to be American, owning a Chevy attested to their patriotism. And so my grandparents were once again exploited by GM. At its core, it has never been and will never be about what is good for the people. It has always come down to generating profits by fulfilling needs and wants. In order to maximize profits, there will always be those who must pay. Most of the time, we associate paying as shelling out money to purchase the products you desire. There will always be those, however, who buy defective or dangerous products that have not gone through testing. Adults and children who work 12-hour days and still can't afford to purchase the products they physically produce. However, sometimes greed is left dangerously unregulated, and it might end up costing you your savings to bail out the entire industry that put you in this situation to begin with. And I don't foresee myself as one individual making change. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not sure if
that kind of change on a massive level is really possible, because I don't have that kind of money and I don't have that kind of political clout. And once those inner circles are made, they're really hard to destroy. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have knowledge and awareness, because that doesn't mean that one day things can't change. Right now, maybe they can't, but in the future, maybe they could. And so I don't think it's a matter of seeing it as a real possibility today, but not giving up the fight. And so that if I infect one person or impact one person and they impact somebody else, who knows who they'll reach. And so all I can do is what I can do. And maybe one day it'll change, but that would require a change in capitalism, not just in these corporations. So the end goal can't just be individual wealth. It would have to be wealth of your country and of your land as a whole.
Thank you.
When I thought of my paper and what I wanted to write about, I was thinking that we are in the greatest financial recession since the Great Depression. And I mentioned to someone what it would be like, and please don't judge me, if I had to all of a sudden take a job at Burger King because I could no longer afford to go to Whole Foods on a Tuesday afternoon and have like the saxophone play while I eat my organic tofu or whatever it is. So if all of a sudden I was forced to do things that were out of my comfort zone, if I got so desperate, if the middle class, if the largest population of contributors in America got so desperate because we were put out of our comfort zones and had to do the things that we don't want to do or think that we're above, then maybe that's when there'll be change. Because during the Great Depression, and I'm not a history major, we were taken out of the Great Depression once we went into World War II because we had profits. So again, it was up to them to make the decisions of how we were going to get back on track. But maybe if I started doing something because I was put into a situation and people started following me, I'd have more control. If we want to prevent another Holocaust or genocide from occurring in the future, we can't just hold the most obvious figures accountable. That people have to finance these massive moves and exterminations. It doesn't just happen with one person. And, you know, I'm not saying that I'm here to change the system, but we need to take a deeper look at the things that are going on instead of just walking so blindly and accepting what it is, like AK said, because it's easier. And I understand why my grandparents, you know, did what they did, and I understand why it was easier to buy a Chevrolet. But at the beginning of the semester, I learned that there are always more choices than the ones that we see in front of ourselves. And sometimes we have to create the path, even if we don't see it, and just go based on what we feel is right. So, thank you.